Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. And in today's video, I will be taking one of my first looks. I took a look at it a few weeks ago, but I'm taking another look at the 2022 Senate. I don't necessarily want to call this a prediction as it is January, but I guess that's the best word to describe it. Just an update, what I think is going to happen at the moment. Not much data at the moment. Obviously, no polls. Not that many polls to be able to be trusted. But not many polls and not much to look at for data. No forecasts, no candidates really, no approval ratings, not really much. So I'm just going to have to be going based off of historical results and trends at the moment. So let's start off with the safe Democratic states, Washington and Oregon. These are two safe Democratic states. Patty Murray and Ron Wyden, two popular incumbents, definitely going to win. California is definitely going to be a safe state. Alex Padilla is the new senator that got appointed by Gavin Newsom to replace Kamala Harris. I'm assuming he's going to run again in 2022. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the state with its jungle primary, but I'm confident that a Democrat will win. In the state of Colorado, the state has been shifting leftward. It was about a 10% margin of victory in the Senate, and I believe 2016, the last time that the seat was up, it was might have been in the 2020, I think it was actually in the 2020 Senate results. One of those, it was about a 10% margin of victory in one of the more recent Senate, because there was no Senate in 2018. So it was either the 2016 or 2020 Senate, although I highly doubt that it was 2016, as Hillary Clinton only carried it by less than 5%. Anyways, it was about 10%, and like I said, I believe 2020. And it's shifting to the left. Joe Biden won it by about 13%. I think that'll probably be about 14%. So on the line between being safe and likely. Ultimately, we'll probably end up being safe. State of Illinois, Tammy Duckworth, relatively new to politics in 2016. She won by a comfortable margin. She, now that she is the incumbent, will almost certainly win by around 17%. Maryland, Connecticut, Vermont, all safe Democratic states. Patrick Leahy in Vermont, this will be interesting to see if he decides to run again, or if the Vermont Democratic Party runs somebody else. If he were to retire, because he is quite old, if he were to retire, it would be interesting to see what happens. If Governor Phil Scott were to run, I doubt he would run. But if he were to run and somehow miraculously win, that could be interesting. I highly doubt that he would run, and if he were to, for whatever reason, decide to run, I doubt that he would win. Instead of New York, that's not really much of a surprise. It is a safe Democratic state, and Senate Majority Leader and incumbent Chuck Schumer will most certainly win. I don't think that there's going to be much primary opposition. I don't think AOC is going to primary him or try to, for that matter. State of Hawaii, safe Democratic state, no real surprise there. It shifted like 6% to the right or something this year on the presidential. I don't see, it was still like a 25 plus Democratic state. I don't see it, even if it does shift by over 5-6% again, it would still probably be a safe Democratic state, and I don't see it doing that again. It'll still probably be a safe Democratic state. I don't see it shifting much more. Now for the safe Republican states, Utah, Idaho, and the Dakotas, none of these are surprises. If Heidi Heitkamp were to run, there is some speculation that it could be competitive, but it probably won't be. Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Kentucky, Indiana, Missouri, these two are, we can talk about these for a second. They could both be competitive. They could both easily be like 14% margins of victory. That wouldn't really necessarily be competitive. We could see competitive races, though, like, for example, in Indiana or Missouri, if Jason Kander were to run, it would probably be a competitive state, probably decided by a few percentage points, especially after, after Roy Blunt got his seat. He lost a lot of support between 2018 and 2012. However, a lot of that was due to Jason Kander. I don't necessarily think that's support loss. I think it is just support gained by Jason Kander. I think a lot of those voters will go back to him. Worst case scenario, without Jason Kander or another prominent Democrat like him, a likely 12% victory, although probably with no Jason Kander, which is probably the most likely scenario, it'll probably be 15 plus. Now for the likely Democratic states. Oh, I forgot to label Georgia. That's going to be safe regardless. Oh, also Alabama and South Carolina are going to be both safe unless Democrats unless Democrats nominate really good candidates that can somehow take on these incumbents. I doubt it would happen. We would have to see something very unusual happening, and given politics, there will probably be some very unusual things going on. But I don't think that either of them will be terribly competitive. South Carolina has the potential, but given that Tim Scott is a popular incumbent, it'll probably be 15 plus. Now, two states I want to look at: Iowa and Alaska. First off, Chuck Grassley, I believe, is 87 years old. If he were to run again, which would not be out of the question, Dianne Feinstein has announced that she will run again, and she will be, I believe, 91 when she does, which means that by the end of her term, she would be 97. Sorry, it took me a second to do the math there, because I don't know why. Normally I can add 6 to numbers. I don't know why it took me so long. But it would not be out of the question to see him running again. He would be like 93 at the end of his term. But I think that he would probably I think that there's a very good chance that he will retire. Like I said, he is 87 years old. If he decides not to retire, it'll almost certainly be a safe state, at least probably 20 percentage point victory. If he decides to retire, it'll probably be 6 to 5% victory. It'll be a little bit more competitive, but it'll probably be between 5 and 7%. Right now, he has not announced that he will retire, so it's going to be a Republican state otherwise, so it won't affect the outcome. I will just say that. And then instead of Alaska, Lisa Murkowski leaves the Republican Party, becomes an independent, and caucuses with the Democrats, or just registers as a Democrat. She would still win. This state is going to most likely be a safe state, either safe red or safe blue, all depending on what Lisa Murkowski decides to do. So, hey, that rhymes. Anyways, it will be a safe state regardless of what it is. It's just a question as to whether or not who will win. At the moment, Lisa Murkowski is still a Republican. There's been a lot of speculation, and there's a very good chance that she does leave the GOP. But at the moment, she is still currently a Republican, so I'm going to label that a safe Republican state. Now, say to Kansas, it'll probably be safe, maybe likely. And it all really depends on what happens. If Barbara Bollier runs, then it could be a little bit more competitive. But I don't really see it being terribly competitive. If Laura Kelly runs, their Democratic governor, it could be relatively competitive. I think that the worst case scenario for Republicans is a high lean, like a 5% margin of victory. But at the moment, it doesn't look like it will be very competitive. It is shifting to the left, but they're going to need good candidates. Like, it's going to shift to the left with good enough candidates. Right now, there's not really many good candidates that have or I don't think anyone that's announced that they will run. Now, for the likely Democratic states, I don't believe I have any. For the likely Republican states, we have a few. First off, the state of Florida, I'm debating whether or not I should put this in the likely or safe call, or the likely or lean column, because it really does depend. It'll be somewhere on the line. And it also depends on the candidates. If Marco Rubio does choose to retire, which I don't think he will, but if he, for some reason, were to choose to retire, he will. The state will probably be a competitive state, especially since Florida voters like incumbents. So with no incumbent, it could be very competitive, especially if there's a disliked Republican and a strong Democrat such as Val Demings. It could be a very competitive state. At the moment, I don't think that Marco Rubio will retire, and I don't think that there are many Democrats that could make it competitive that would. Like I said, Val Demings probably could. I'm trying to think of other prominent Democrats. There are other prominent Democrats who could be strong candidates, but not any to take it out of the likely characterization that I can think of at the moment. So at the moment, it's probably going to be a likely Republican state, probably around 6%, maybe 5 or 4, but it's still going to go to the GOP regardless. Now, that I think is it for the likely Republican states. Now for the lean Democratic states. First off, I'm going to characterize these two together. Nevada and Arizona. Catherine Cortez Masto and Mark Kelly. Catherine Cortez Masto from Nevada and Mark Kelly from Arizona. Both won their races by 2.4%. As Nevada is not necessarily shifting to the right or to the left, I think it's probably going to be a lean state. Catherine Cortez Masto is that incumbent, does have that incumbent factor, so it'll probably be around what she won by back in 2016. And Mark Kelly, considering that the Arizona suburbs are getting bluer slower than the rest of the nation, and the state still was a Democratic state, and the suburbs are getting bluer, there's, like I said, going slower than the rest of the nation, it was still a Democratic state, and that turnout seems to be growing. I think that Arizona will probably be lean. It'll probably be around 3%. I don't necessarily think that it's shifting that fast. It'll be a 4 or 5% margin of victory. Like I said, probably 3%, between 2.5% and 3%, maybe 3.5%. Best case scenario for Mark Kelly, but I still think it'll be a Democratic state. Now, there are 6 states remaining. I will go get a few out of the way. First off, Ohio. Yesterday, incumbent Rob Portman announced that he will not run again in 2022, which is awful news for the Republican Party. This state was expected to be at least a 20% margin, or around a 20% margin of victory. I made a video about Rob Portman's retirement and how it could affect the GOP. But ultimately, I'll sum it up. First off, it makes the state a lot more competitive, and honestly, we could see prominent Democrats, if there's a prominent enough Democrat and a bad enough Republican, which it's looking like there's probably going to be a somewhat bad Republican, not for Ohio, honestly, but for most other states, and a pretty strong Democrat. I'll talk about that in a minute. But that's, then Democrats can do well. But also, Republicans are going to have to put some funding into Ohio, which will take money out from other areas such as Arizona, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Florida, states that they need wins in. So it could definitely affect them in negative ways. But like I was saying, Jim Jordan, he's been relatively prominent in the news in recent weeks, I guess I should say, in recent events. Congressman from Ohio is currently one of the favorites, in my opinion, the favorite to win the Republican primary and become the Republican nominee for Ohio. While on the Democratic side, it's probably Tim Ryan. Now, I think that Tim Ryan versus Jim Jordan in Wisconsin would be a lean state. In New Hampshire would probably be likely, maybe even safe. Pennsylvania, probably lean. North Carolina, very competitive. Probably tilt red, though. Georgia, definitely tilt blue, maybe even lean blue. But in Ohio, definitely lean red. Because, like I said, I didn't say this, but I was hinting at it. It's a Trump state. Voted with Trump by 8%. I think that it'll probably be a much more competitive state, especially with Tim Ryan, who can do, I think, pretty well in Ohio. Also, considering Joe Biden and Donald Trump weren't, I think that Joe Biden appealed to those, I think both Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton appealed to a lot of those Ohio voters, a lot worse than Donald Trump. I think that Donald Trump is a much more likable candidate to a lot of these Ohio voters, but I don't necessarily think that Jim Jordan is. I think a lot of these voters aren't necessarily Republican voters, they're Trump voters, and while they do vote they did vote for Rob Portman by like 20% in 2016, we do have to remember that they elected Sherrod Brown by around 6% in 2018. So I think that this state is still definitely a competitive state, not with Trump. As Trump runs, it probably won't be very competitive, but it's still a fairly competitive state. And with Jim Jordan and then running against Tim Ryan, who I think is a pretty strong candidate, it could be within 2%. I think it'll probably be more like 3%. It'll definitely be relatively competitive, but it is currently a lean red state. Now, there are currently 5 states left. I will go label one of them. The state of New Hampshire, I'm not sure whether to label it tilt or lean. It's going to be around there. Maggie Hassan, Democratic incumbent, barely won in 2016. She won by a little over 1,000 votes. Now, she is the incumbent, which is obviously a good thing. But there is a lot of speculation, and it's going to be a lean to likely blue state if this doesn't happen. If Chris Sununu doesn't run, I'm assuming that he will run, which is why I'm labeling it tilt blue. Chris Sununu is a pretty strong candidate, a moderate. Honestly, he could very easily be a Democrat. He is a lot of these northeastern states like to elect moderates to their governorships. So Chris Sununu, if he were to run, I think could make this race very close. He won by around 60% or 60%, 30% in his gubernatorial race. I think that Maggie Hassan though would barely edge out I didn't say this, but I was thinking gubernatorial races. I say I was thinking this I was thinking while I was making this. I was thinking this a few hours ago, but gubernatorial races are a lot different from Senate races. Being a governor is a lot different from being a senator. While I think that a lot of governors do run for senator, and while a lot of governors do succeed, it's not necessarily the same thing. Considering that Maggie Hassan is the incumbent in a state that she won, it was a 7+ Biden state, or 7 more than 7, but it was a +7 over 7 Biden state. And considering that she is the incumbent, and it is supposed to be a red wave year. I don't think it will be. I think it might barely be, but it won't be noticeable. But I think that she will probably eke out a victory by 0.7 to 1.2 at best percent. Now there's a few states left. There's 4 states left. So Wisconsin. Let's talk about Wisconsin for a second. I think either today or yesterday, Ron Johnson announced that he will, he didn't announce that he won't be running again. He said that he might not run again, which is definitely leaving a lot of room for speculation as to whether or not he's, gonna run again or not. Because, we don't know. He might just say, okay, well, I'm gonna run now, but then again, he also might decide not to run. We don't really know. I think that if he were to run, it'll be a tilt red state by 0.2%. It'll be insanely close. I think that if he were to not run, it would probably be a tilt D state by 0.3, 0.4%. It's going to be very competitive either way. Considering the fact that Ron Johnson might not run, and that Joe Biden did win the state, even if it is shifting to the right, it will still probably be a tilt Democratic state. Now, let's go talk about another state. Let's go talk about Georgia. I think that Georgia is lean blue. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself and say, I don't want us to get ahead of ourselves and say, oh, this is a safe Democratic state, because it is by no means safe. It is going to be very competitive. It could even be tilt blue. It's going to be on the line from being lean. It's not going to be like Arizona or Nevada, where it's going to be 2-3% margins of victory. It's going to be at best for Democrats, 1.5 percentage points, on 1.5% margin of victory. Because if you look at this, yes, okay, Raphael Warnock won by large margins. However, these races were very hyped up, and I'm sure that the Georgia Senate races will be as well. But they did very well, and also I don't want to say that Kelly Loeffler. I was thinking David Perdue. Kelly Loeffler was an awful candidate. David Perdue lost by about 1.5%. Considering the fact that David Perdue lost by about 1.5%, and Raphael Warnock will probably be the incumbent, I think he'll probably win by around 1.5%, similar to what David Perdue, or what I should say John Ossoff won by. If you look at this is something that Doug Collins does run. If they run a Trumpist, Kelly Loeffler type candidate, it's probably like a 2%, maybe 2.5% margin of victory. But if they were to run Doug Collins, it would probably be about 1.5%, maybe even 0.8%. I say that it's very similar. That's the worst case scenario for Democrats. 1.5% is the best case. It's going to be very competitive. It really does depend on the candidates, though. But Raphael Warnock being the incumbent, and considering that more moderate candidate David Perdue lost by about 1.5%. Doug Collins is a little bit more moderate than David Perdue. Raphael Warnock, however, did win by more, and he does have the incumbency factor. Probably be somewhere around there, so it could be easily tilt blue. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves saying that it's a lean blue state. It's still going to be definitely very competitive. Tilt blue or lean blue. I'm going to actually label it lean or tilt blue, just so, like I said, we don't get too far ahead of ourselves. Now, there are 2 states left, my bad. Pennsylvania and North Carolina. Now, Pennsylvania, I think it's probably tilt blue. Tom Wolf, popular Democratic governor who's going to retire, or not going to retire, is term limited, might run. I don't want to say will be running. If for those of you that don't know, their incumbent Pat Toomey is retiring, which is awful news for them. If Tom Wolf decides to run, I think it'll probably be like a lean Democratic state by about what Joe Biden won, maybe 0.9, 0.8-ish, but it'll probably be a tilt blue state. Worst case scenario for Democrats, a 0.5% victory. That's probably the worst case. Maybe tilt red. I doubt it. I don't see it voting red. Now, in the state of North Carolina, this one is a real toss-up. And it all really depends on the candidates. If it's a Trumpist right-wing candidate, so for Democrats to be able to win, there would have to be three things. First off, a Trumpist right-wing candidate like Kelly Loeffler in Georgia or Martha McSally in Arizona, or Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. Thing number two, I guess, they would have to run Roy Cooper. That's one of the biggest things. They would have to run Roy Cooper. The North Carolina Democratic Party is almost a joke at this point. I can't think of anyone else other than Roy Cooper that could be like relatively competitive. So run Roy Cooper, and then the last step is to I keep on calling them steps. The last thing that they need to do, they need to do well. They need to do very well in urban areas. They have high turnout, especially among black voters. Their turnout represents their share of the electorate. I took a look at a map I took a look a while ago at when Obama won it in the exit polls, and they have relatively similar shares of the electorate. But the only difference is that Obama did much better among all these voters. He did better among black voters, and he did better among white voters. Democrats will have to be able to do better among these voters. They'll have to make serious inroads among not only white rural voters, or not serious inroads. They only need to do a little bit better, but do better among urban black voters and honestly black voters across the entire state, because a lot of these southern states have a lot of black voters all throughout the states. A lot of the time, we look at a lot of these population centers for the black turnout or whatever, but in reality, a lot of these southern states, Georgia isn't all these black voters only in Atlanta. There are black voters all throughout the state, and it's not like Iowa, where there's like, yeah, okay, there are people in Iowa who aren't white, but it's not like there are like legitimately large populations of black voters all throughout the state. North Carolina, Democrats need to do much better among those voters if they want to be able to win in the state. And they need to do better among white rural voters than they currently are. Right now, I just don't see that happening. I'm going to have to label it tilt red. I think that Democrats could easily, or I don't want to say easily when to say, I think that it's easy to say they could win. I also think it's easy to say that Republicans could win. It's going to be a very competitive state. We already know that. It's just whether or not Democrats are able to do better among white rural voters and suburban voters. They need to do better among suburban voters and a lot of those black voters across the state. Even if they don't, though, it's 52-48. And I'll tell you why this is significant. If in 2024, if they go into it with a 52-48 majority, Democrats don't even, they would still need to win in, at least, they would still need to win either the presidency or one of these two Senate races. But they don't need to keep their seats. They only need to win one of these three. Their seat in West Virginia, their seat in Montana, or the presidency. I think there's a good chance that they win the presidency. I think there's an alright chance that they win in Montana. I think that there's a meh chance that they win in West Virginia. Joe Manchin's probably going to lose, in all likelihood. This nation's getting too polarized for split-ticket voting at this point. There are a few states, like Maine, that do split ticketing, in Montana in the past, West Virginia in the past. I don't see it happening. I think that Joe Manchin at this point, the state's so conservative that he probably won't win. If he were to win, he would win by like a 0.5 percentage point. I'll tell you what, if he were to win in 2024, he's not going to win in 2030. I can almost assure you of that. But this is very significant because they just need to win one of those three at this point if they were to have this type of majority. And then they would be able to keep the Senate in 2024. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry this video is so long. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Stay tuned to for my next video, whenever that may be, and I will see you guys there. Bye.